Stable gains versus quick gains, both have pros and cons. G'day runners, welcome to Running Alive. Let's get out for some runs. I'll take you through my thought, then we'll come back and we'll pull it all apart and we'll go through some details that will help you improve your running. Right, time for some hill repeats. Getting some strength in the legs. Making sure technique is through full range of motion. There's a number of reasons why I'm not going completely all out on these hill repeats. And that reason comes back to I'm chasing stable gains, not just quick gains. It will take me longer to reach a certain performance level. One, that's okay. I haven't got any races coming up this year. And two, that performance level, it's going to be much higher and it's going to be much more predictable, stable. I'm going to be able to hold it. If you're on a tight time frame, there's ways to get those quick gains, get yourself up to that performance, but it's not as reliable and you can't hold it. And just because it's not completely flat out doesn't mean it's not hard. Trying to get that technique right while you're under pressure of running uphill, getting some air time with the push off each stride, it pushes the intensity up. It's just not right at 100%, but it's repeatable, sustainable, pushes out the envelope, and hopefully it's reinforcing some good technique. Let's break down these stable versus quick gains, and we'll begin by looking at the quick gains. Quick gains is what you're chasing when you've got a very short deadline. So if you've got a race like in 6 weeks or something like that, you haven't got the time for an extended long training program. There's a few tricks where you can force up your performance level. It does come with some risks though. So what are those risks? Well, there's 3. First and foremost, injury risk. When you're pushing that envelope on the edge, you just put yourself at a higher injury risk. The second risk is you overcook yourself. You go in, you train hard, and you don't recover from it. And you go into your race carrying way too much fatigue, and you underperform. And the third risk is you just get the timing of your peak performance all wrong. You've got a narrow window to get it right. And the greatest mistake we find is that the peak happens after the race itself. So 2 to 4 weeks after the goal race, that's when the athlete is really hitting their peak. So in short, they tend to do too much, too close to the race. The approach I like to take in this situation is we'll get rid of most of the easy work and get rid of the low intensity, really long sessions, and instead fill it up with a lot of race pace work and some intervals that's just a little bit faster than race pace, and most of it over the terrain you'll be racing at. Now the race pace efforts will depend on your fitness and the event you're training for, but the idea of them is that you don't absolutely fry yourself. Keep them at a moderate level, which means you have to adjust the volume and whether they're going to be a continuous run or if you're going to break them up with a few rest periods in between. The idea is that you can repeatedly, like every second day, practice the pace that you're going to be racing at. For the efforts a little bit above race pace, well, again, that's still trying to gain some fitness. These are hard sessions. The basic concept is we'll get rid of all the extra work, most of the work at paces well away from race pace, and we practice and get used to and make efficient what we expect of our bodies during the race. There's other ways to approach it, but I've had the most success with this approach. On a slightly different note, restrictions here in Melbourne have opened up somewhat, so the exercise radius, instead of being 5 kilometres, is out to 25, and there's no longer any time limits, no curfews, so from exercise it's a good thing. Also allowed to go and get a haircut. Time to start. 6 times 1 kilometre. Well, this week's intervals were a lot harder. The course I chose had a few more undulations, but that probably wasn't really it. Legs are probably just feeling a little bit more of the accumulated training, which is not a bad thing. I was able to hold the paces, and if anything, had trouble keeping the pace even, so a couple of them were probably a bit too fast, one a little slow, but hey, I think I got what I need to out of the session. It's not what we're here for though. Let's talk about gains. Stable gains is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm looking at the long-term picture. Gradually pushing out that training, making sure I can back it up in a day or so. Yes, it's going to take longer, but it's going to set my low point much, much higher. But I have used quick gains in the past. In fact, my best race was the 2013 Surf Coast Century 100k trail race. I came in well undertrained, plenty of gaps in the training, but in a short time frame, about 6 weeks, I focused on pushing myself in some intervals, really nailing in that race pace and getting rid of everything else. The risk was there. If I missed the mark a little bit, I was going to have a hell of a race. As it turned out, I got everything right, and I took 47 minutes off my previous 100 kilometre best time. To simplify the concept, let's look at just one type of session, an interval session. Say it's 6 times 1 kilometre repeats, 2 to 3 minutes recovery. If you're going for stable gains, you're going to be a bit more careful of the pace of these. So you might aim for something like your best pace over 40 to 45 minutes. Critical pace or critical power amounts to the same thing. It's not completely flat out. It's not right on the limit, but it's a good, solid effort that will get you improvement. You keep progressing over weeks and weeks, you'll make some very big gains. On the other hand, if you're going for the quick gains, let's make those kilometre repeats right on the limit. The absolute best pace you can hold for all 6 of them, probably even failing on that final rep. You'll make a big jump in fitness, but there's a risk. You bring yourself up to a peak in performance, but the downslope after that peak is usually very steep, and it takes a while to get back to rebuilding again. So it might put yourself 4 weeks behind if you miss your mark. Now, some of you may have picked up or even asked the question, what if we combine the two? And essentially, that's the ultimate. If you can build that foundation, you gradually raise your base level of fitness and performance over weeks to months, going for those stable gains, but then you throw in a period where you're aiming for the quicker gains, where you up that intensity, you put yourself on the limit, and if you time it right, well, then you might have the performance of your lifetime. As for my own training, it's going pretty well. Last week I had to take it a bit easier. It was fairly overcooked from hitting 70 Ks and the extra intensity that I ran close together. That seems to have done the trick, and I'm heading back, not increasing anything this week, still keeping the sessions about at the same level. We'll probably hit about 70 kilometres again, and not doing anything too crazy, but making sure I'm covering all those speeds. The sprints, the hill sessions, the intervals, the slow, easy recoveries, and the long runs. At some point, when races come back, I'll be ready to ramp it up, get those last minute quick gains, and hopefully smash out a race of my lifetime. Right, 5k limit is lifted out to 25k, which means I can now continue uphill, no longer out of bounds. Turning into quite the wet run. So I've made sure I've included hills on this long run, and I think I forgot how steep these ones actually are out here. Oh well. It's got to make me stronger. How are you approaching your training? Do you think in terms of quick gains or stable gain? I'd love to hear about it. There's so many approaches, so many different ways. Most training works. Some works better than others, but not all the time. Keep on running.